Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today's Brain Health series, we will be discussing the art of sharing a dementia diagnosis. If I have not met you before, I'm Marla Gordon, Director of Clinical Services here at Kendal at Home. And we're happy to have with us Julia Johnson from Brush Development. Whether you are diagnosed with dementia or a loved one caring for someone with dementia, determining how to have those conversations with loved ones and friends and begin that discussion about your diagnosis can be a difficult one. So today we've invited Julia to join us to talk about that subject. Julia is a speech pathologist and a certified dementia practitioner with Brush Development, and we're happy to have you with us today, Julia. Thank you for joining us. If you wouldn't mind,
Marla.
All right, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little more about yourself, I'll turn it over to you and
Sure.
you get started. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. I hope you guys are all having a beautiful day or the start of a beautiful day today. And my name is Julia, as Marla had said, and I am a speech therapist. I've worked in geriatrics and long-term care with the dementia population for about 20 years. So just recently, I left long-term care and I decided to branch out and to do something a little bit different. So I was actually very excited to join the Brush Development team. It is an amazing team if you are not familiar with them. And so, but one of the things that also made it really especially needed for me to kind of do more in the line of geriatrics and being in long-term care and then coming on with Brush Development is that my mother and father-in-law both ended up with dementia. My mother-in-law has Alzheimer's and my father-in-law had Wernicke's-Korsakoff's. And so it was a very interesting change, a dynamic for my husband's family and how we move through this. So as we talk today about sharing a diagnosis and kind of the steps that you have to go through before you even get the diagnosis and then how to share it, it's definitely something that is near and dear to my heart, and also something that I think it's a very special, intimate topic that family members and loved ones and friends all need to come together and understand the support that's needed. So we'll get started this morning, and the title clearly is The Art of Sharing the Dementia Diagnosis. And I want to say that there's so much science behind getting the diagnosis, so much science in Alzheimer's and all of understanding dementia in general. But at the same time, there is an art to talking about it. And sometimes it's really difficult. And so today I want to bring in some of the things that you can help and think about as you're moving through these stages. So to start with, what we're going to go through today, I'm just going to go through some general facts, things that you may already know, but if you're new to this whole situation, just knowing that you're not alone really makes a difference. We'll talk about when it's time to look into figuring out a diagnosis, if there is one to find, what the first steps are and who you're going to meet during that road, walking down that path, sharing that diagnosis, and then having potentially a family meeting. Like I said, everybody's dynamics are very different. And so sometimes people just talk to each other. Sometimes people have to have a meeting because not everybody's together or whatever the situation may be. There may be some complications in the dynamics. And then, excuse me, the final thing that we'll talk about is how to maintain health, mental health, physical health, both for the person who's getting the diagnosis, the caregiver, and then even the adult children, because there's a lot of research that is showing some positive things, some hopeful things for us in the Alzheimer's world. So to begin with, the general information about dementia. And I want to just say that, again, there's facts that are going to be discussed and things that you may already know, but I also want you to really know and really understand that there is truly an abundance of people. And if you're part of the Kendal at Home support group, you know that there's other people who are around to help you and who want to help you. And I think sometimes as we move through this, it's hard to accept help if you're a care partner. So just a few facts. And again, these are more like numbers and things, but Alzheimer's is truly the most common form of dementia that we see. 60 to 80% of the people that have dementia end up having an Alzheimer's diagnosis. And there are other types. There's the Lewy body, there's vascular dementia, There are mixed dementias. There's a variety of other things. There might be head trauma that causes dementia, but Alzheimer's is in of itself its own disease. And even though we think of dementia as this, like it's a disease itself, it is just this umbrella of symptoms. And when you move through each different type of dementia, whether it's Lewy body or Alzheimer's or whatever it might be, there are different processes that the body goes through, different behaviors, different changes, different timings of things. And so, but 60 to 80% are Alzheimer's. So people move through it differently, but we see the same general pattern of progression. There's 6.5 million Americans who live with Alzheimer's, and that's this year. That is the latest number that we have. And by 2050, that number is going to go up to 8.8 million. That is a lot of people. Not only is it a lot of people with the disease itself, it's a lot of caregivers. It's a lot of families who are impacted. I think when we first learned about Alzheimer's, it was like, well, who has it? Don't know anyone. And now you don't hardly know anyone who doesn't know someone with Alzheimer's or who has had it. So we're moving through this, but there's a lot of research out there that is showing some positive things, and that Alzheimer's is a multifactorial problem. And so I'll talk about that briefly in just a moment. Women have a higher likelihood of having Alzheimer's than men. And, you know, there is that belief that, yes, in fact, women live longer, and that's true. That's part of it. But at the same time, women have different biochemical makeups, different types of hormones or higher levels of hormones than men. We all have testosterone, we all have progesterone and estrogen and all those things, but women have a different amount of those. And so what we call a trophic factor, which is kind of what your body keeps and generates to keep itself healthy, we have different levels of those things. We have different levels of hormones. We have different levels of stress. And sometimes our stress levels as females can actually be higher than those of men. And so that is why, along with age, that women have a higher likelihood. And then, of course, there's the genetic component as well, but that's not necessarily male or female. And then at this point, some researchers have found that there are 6 subtypes of Alzheimer's. And what that means is that, so you get the disease, but what it's made up of or why you get it is caused by inflammation in your body. It's caused by those trophic factors, which are like those hormone levels and other neurodegenerative properties and chemistries within our bodies, vascular things, head traumas. And so there's these different 6 subtypes of Alzheimer's, and how they're looked at is very different. But it all lands under the name of Alzheimer's because of the progression of it and how it looks. So a few more facts is that as you walk through the grocery store, here's kind of a way to consider it. As you walk through the grocery store, or you're at maybe a ball game or something, and you see just a lot of people in the stadium, you see people in the bleachers, you're at the grocery store and it's a busy day. 1 in 10 of people in those spaces has Alzheimer's. And so if they're 65 or older. And so it's kind of unusual when you think about it in that perspective, how many others are walking around you that you could be looking at somebody who has it or will get it because it's so prevalent. 110 people out of 100,000 are diagnosed with early onset. And the interesting thing about early onset in any dementia or any Alzheimer's is that it's in the body and it's ruminating and it's cooking itself up 10 to 20 years before anyone even sees a symptom, a forgetfulness moment, a forgetting or a losing a word or things like that. And so it's in us. And so what we want to do as we move through our lives, if you have it, if you are looking, and you're considering diagnosis, or if you're a family member who might be considering doing something better for your life and for your health span, these are the times that we want to just remember that what we do now is really going to impact how we are later in our lives. And so when we look at it, there's things that we can help. And when we talk about early onset Alzheimer's, it's If a person is getting clinical symptoms at 55, that's already been in their bodies, and things could have been worked on and helped to prevent or slow the disease back in their 20s. It's really quite astounding what they're finding. Right now, every 67 seconds, somebody is diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And by 2050, every 33 seconds, somebody's going to hear those words emanated from their physician's mouths. So it is not going away at this point, but we are looking more and more research and scientifically that yes, in fact, there are things that can help. And in 2022, about 500,000 cases will be diagnosed. But keep in mind, prevention is key. And I'm sure that many of you who are listening today have actually heard, oh, you know, if I eat better, if I exercise, if I do this myriad of things, I can help slow that. And yes, in fact, you can. It's what the biohackers and the scientists and the neuroscientists are finding is just a lot of great information on how we live now really affects how we are later. Even if you're in your 70s, you can still do things that are right to keep yourself from progressing into that. Here's the Alzheimer's pie. And what you'll see here, it doesn't constitute for the early onset folks because it's 65 and above. But between 75 and 85 plus years of age, there really is a very equal number that people are finding out that they have Alzheimer's. And again, it's because those clinical signs are showing up. When they were in their 60s, they may have had, you know, just a start of it, but they didn't know. And so certainly the pie is very much shaped from the 75 to 85 year range, very similarly, with a little bit less being diagnosed earlier. And those facts were taken from the Alzheimer's Association this year. So when do you start considering whether a diagnosis is really worthwhile? When is it that you decide that you need to start looking for some answers? And again, when we look at causation, we know that a person who has Alzheimer's or is starting to develop Alzheimer's has had that going on within their system for a while. And so what seems maybe potentially as I think it's just really in menopause. I'm more forgetful because I have that brain fog now. Or somebody is just like, you know, I had some trouble just remembering some stuff at the grocery store today. And then all of a sudden I got lost for a second, but I got it back. When you start seeing things like this, what we want to start doing is considering looking into it further earlier so that there's ways that you can work to manage it in the early season of it versus when it's too late. And that I will say from my own perspective with my mother and father-in-law, my mother-in-law especially, with her diagnosis of Alzheimer's, she waited a really long time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So when do you consider making the appointment? For early onset, again, if you have like a consistent brain fog, if you're having problems at work, if managing the kids or getting the home activities done, you just find yourself roaming in circles, or you get to the job site and you're just kind of, I can't make the decisions that I used to. People who are accountants find that they have trouble with like getting their calculations done. They can't focus very well. Those kinds of things, they may just be a day. They may be a glucose spike. They may be just a random thing. But when you notice it consistently, it might be time to talk to your primary care physician to consider things, look into other things more, because we don't want to miss that for sure. Mild cognitive impairment, that's one of the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia. And again, it's that memory loss, the change in making and solving problems, getting the laundry done, executing something, or going out to mow the grass, or you get started and you forget kind of partway through what you're doing when you're working on an activity. There might be some changes in your talking and in the writing that somebody has. There, you may notice if you are a loved one or a care partner that there's misspellings, that words are coming more difficultly for an individual, and somebody might be stammering more or having these faces of hesitancy. And those are definitely signs of word finding issues. Now, the person themselves may also be like, what the heck? I can't think of the words anymore. Again, if it's consistent, we want to start looking and investigating. Difficulty orienting. The other piece that sometimes people don't pay attention to is changes in your movement patterns. One of the interesting things that happened with my mother-in-law was when she started to walk, and she just had a knee replacement, but she started not swinging her arms when she walked. And she was all really kind of tight, close into her body, like she was trying to maintain her stability. And just any kind of additional movement to turn and talk, those kinds of things all changed for her. And my husband and I are in the healthcare space, and so we recognize that. But as individuals who aren't in the healthcare space, his sisters they didn't notice it. And so it was one of those things that we brought carefully to the attention of my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, but were met with hesitancy and concern and fear. So watch for changes in movement or dropping things like that, and notable problems with just completing daily activities. Then in the middle stages, now we should already have a diagnosis, or we should already anticipate that it's dementia at this point. However, in the case of my mother-in-law, she was really struggling before she would allow anyone to look at her. And this is how people feel. It's a denial component, it's fear, it's pride, it's any of those things. But when you're having trouble remembering, where you went to school or getting yourself ready in the morning, bowel and bladder issues are a problem. That she wasn't quite that far along yet, but she had some changes in her sleeping. She had really some crazy attention issues. My father-in-law wasn't comfortable leaving her alone. And finally, the big piece was when she was driving somewhere. Yes, she was still driving. She couldn't figure out how to get there. So she was able to turn around and come home, but she was much further into the progression of the disease before she would allow any help. So the earlier and the more communication that can be put together between a husband and a wife, or the person and a friend, or a trusted person in their lives, is very important to be able to have open conversations about changes that are going on, so people don't wait too long. So beyond that, so we know that when a person is having trouble and it's consistent and it looks like it's changing, that it's time to at least have it investigated. Now, they may find through physician visits that it's not Alzheimer's or it's not dementia at all. It might be something else. But a practitioner visit is really important. And so we'll talk a little bit about the practitioner visits if, in fact, again, you're still in a place where you're considering and walking down this road. But the practitioner visits themselves, that can be a lot. It can be a lot for people to anticipate because there's a lot of moving parts and people who are unfamiliar with the medical system. And so helping with explaining this to your loved one or your family members who may be going through it is an important aspect as well. So who do you actually see? Well, initially, you're going to start out by going to your PCP or your primary care provider, primary care physician. And that's the person who follows your mom, yourself, your husband, your wife. And so you're going to probably go, that's who I trust the most and who I'm going to start out with, because they're going to refer you on to someone else who is going to make additional diagnoses, take tests, do a variety of different things. So you're going to start with your primary care provider. Then you'll probably see a neurologist who's going to be a physician that specializes in brain function, the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. And in some cases, there are neurologists now who are actually really specializing in dementia because it's such a broad and large volume. There's so much information and there's so many people. You may also see, or your loved one may see, a neuropsychologist. This is an individual who goes through, it's not a physician, but it is a practitioner. It doesn't have to be a physician. who specializes in the assessing of the cognitive functions and looking at the different domains of executive function, attention, memory, all of those different things, word finding and language. But then there's other people. You might have had some PT because there was a gait change. There was a change in how you could walk, or how your loved one was, instead of picking up his or her feet, they were shuffling more. Or there was a complaint of something because the body was just not moving correctly. So PTs might have been seen, occupational therapists, sometimes speech therapists, health coaches. So there may be this myriad of people and practitioners that you're going to run into along the journey of actually getting diagnosed. So what do they do? So like I said, your primary care physician or your PCP is going to be the one who starts the ball rolling. He or she is going to work with you on maybe taking a urine sample, getting some blood done, blood taken, maybe doing a simple MMSE, which is the mini mental status exam, or a MOCA, which is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. They may do that in the office. Those two cognitive assessments are very quick. And maybe some of you who are sitting here today actually have already been with a loved one or have already done these tests yourselves. So you're very in the know. But that's pretty much where you're going to start. And if there's things that look unusual, they're going to send you off, that primary care physician is going to send you off to the neurologist. And neurologist is going to really take a deep dive into how that central nervous system is working. How is the brain working? They're going to do some physical and mental checks. They're going to look at how you react and your reflexes and all these other things. Additionally, they may also order up an MRI or a CT scan. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But those two things are going to look at how your brain looks. What's changing? What's not changing? Where is it changing? And all of those things give us little pieces. Every single piece starts to put the puzzle pieces in the right places to figure things out for you. Neuropsychologist, again, this is the one who's going to do all those standard assessments and going to look at the various domains of cognition. So what to consider? This in and of itself, all these different people and all of these moving parts are going to all have to be scheduled. So one of the things to consider is that this takes some time. Taking time to go to your primary care physician, that referral to get sent, orders to be made, calls to schedule, and you have to do this for all these different people. It can be very, very overwhelming, both for the person who is the care partner, or the spouse or partner or whatever, as well as the individual who has to go through all of this stuff. So things to consider is that this is going to take a few weeks. And as you start moving through this, take a deep breath. There's only so much you can do. And just go with it. It's hard not to get worked up. It's hard not to be fearful. It's hard not to be prideful. But one of the things to really consider is that whomever is looking at you, whoever is wanting you to go, and if you're deciding to go, it is only for your best interest so that people can help take action and you can take action on what's going to happen next. And so besides that, so you're going to be going through the schedule. Each practitioner is probably going to be at a different time. They may be one after another on different days. You may be lucky enough to have a neurologist appointment, and then they might be able to get you in for a CT the same day. Not sure you can do that, but some places can if you're in a big enough system. And depending on where you live, it's hard to say. You may have to travel to go to some specialists. So all of this, again, can be really overwhelming. But one of the things that you also want to do is, if you want to, start looking into some of the things that you might be having done. Ask when you make the call, how long will the appointments be, and things like that. So you can kind of mentally prepare both you and your loved one to kind of lay out what the time frame is going to look like, what the days are going to look like, because we want to make sure that we reduce stress, because stress, we know, also is impacts how our brains function. The more cortisol we have in our systems biochemically, the harder it is on our systems everywhere, our heart, our muscles, and of course, our brain. So we want to keep stress as low as possible. You're waiting your appointments. What can you do? Is there anything that you can do to calm yourself a little bit if you're the person who's being tested, or if you're the loved one who's caring for someone, or both of you? You can write some of the things down. One thing that's extremely helpful for people is as they're getting prepared, and maybe they even started doing this before when they started noticing changes, is take some notes. It doesn't have to be volumes and tomes or a novelette of what's going on, but just write down, what are the changes? Are you noticing changes? How often does it happen? How often are you finding that you're forgetting words? Or how often do you notice that when you're in the middle of something, you're forgetting it? What do you feel? Feelings are a big thing. And that's part of the art of this, is there's so many facts when we look at diagnosis. You have to see a doctor. Doctor has to figure this out and has to figure this out. And like I said, all these bits start coming together. But in the middle, there's this person who has feelings. And there's all of the people that surround that individual who also have feelings. And so be sure that if you're noticing changes in your mood, changes in how nervous or anxious you are, that you write those things down. New situations may cause you anxiety or may just make you feel uncomfortable where they didn't before. And are your loved ones struggling? Sometimes, again, if the loved one or the partner also journals out some things or just takes notes in a little notepad, so you scribble it down when you have a second. It's important, because what the person in the middle of it, you are feeling, is different from what your spouse or your partner or another care partner is feeling or seeing. Sometimes the individual is like, I didn't see that. But the caregiver or the care partner, the loved one, is like, oh, I've noticed this more often. Two stories, and they're real. They're both real. So jotting down some notes. And then if you've had any changes in what you're doing to make your body stronger, have you started maybe doing a little exercise? Have you eaten a little bit better? A little less junk food, a little more veggies? Those things can all make a difference. And what we're looking at now from a lot of the research is that the changes in your lifestyle are momentous. So if you're in the early phases and you're looking at getting diagnosed, keep a journal up too of what it is that you're doing or may have changed in order to impact your mood to be better. And that might be getting out for a walk. Additionally, preparing for the visit. So as you're writing and you're journaling out these things, it's really also important that, I don't know about you, but when I go to the doctor, you feel sick and you've got all these thoughts in your head, or if I'm ready to do something that's really kind of crazy and exciting, I'm all mentally prepared here, but I get there and it's like, whew, what happened to all of that stuff I had in my head? Poof, it just takes a powder. Well, the way that you can help yourself not do that, especially if you're forgetting things more, is write down your questions in advance. So if you know you have these appointments coming up, and I will use my mother as an example for this, is she's going through some health changes. And when she gets to the doctor, she forgets the stuff she wants to ask, or she feels pressured because the office visit isn't very long and she doesn't want to take up the doctor's time. But at the same time, she also is like, I've got all this stuff to say. So what we want to do is have you jot down the questions that you might have, or if you have information from your history. Some people have a really short medical history, don't have much going on with them at all. Other people just have a lot of information, heart issues, kidney issues, diabetes, all kinds of different medications, all of that stuff. And if you're going to a new healthcare provider outside of your normal network, which some people need to do, they may not all have the information that's available through an electronic format. So their system may not talk to your physician's system. And so bringing as much information as you can is going to be very helpful to that visit. sometimes preparing a go bag is what we like to call it at our house. And that's just the bag that you get ready if you have a long day of stuff going on, or you have to travel out of town in order to do some testing, is that you have something in there to eat or to sip on, or, you know, something to, like I said, to nibble on, and maybe a deck of cards or a Sudoku puzzle or a real leisurely book, so that you have something to do while you're waiting. Because sometimes if you have to go out of town, those visits may not be right after each other, but you might have to wait an hour or something in between. And if you're the loved one and you're not in the visit itself, then you have time to kill as well. And you can only visit the gift shop so many times. And then asking somebody to join you. So what if you're a widow or a widower and your kids aren't around, or you don't have kids, and you have to do this and you're just like, oh my God, I don't want to do this alone. Have somebody to go along with you. If for no other reason, have someone to take notes for you. Or you don't need a driver for the majority of these appointments, but having company and having that supportive person that you trust and you know helps bring that stress level down too. It makes it what's very stressful a little bit better. The diagnostic testing. This in and of itself can be a whirlwind of information because it's abbreviations and it's all these ranges and all these words that people don't understand, and nobody knows if it's good or bad, or so looking at some of it is not practical. Going out on the internet, because information is so readily available to us, is also not terribly practical, because you're a special person. And though you may fall into a range of one sort or another, something about what you're reading may not be appropriate for you, and it might scare you worse. So I think most people, their doctors say, don't go out on the internet. And so I would highly recommend that as well. But what your doctors are going to do is, your primary care physician for sure will do a urine test. Some people, if you go to a functional medicine physician, may take a saliva swab. There's a lot of information they're finding out from saliva now as well. But they're going to look at blood counts. They're going to look at your urine. They're going to look at other variables to rule out other things besides dementia or besides Alzheimer's. Because sometimes Alzheimer's characteristics or other diseases, other issues can manifest with the same symptoms as Alzheimer's. And so they want to make sure that your diabetes is under control if you have that, looking at your kidney and liver function. They may do a tox panel on you, which in some cases, some physicians do this, some don't. But what we're finding is that there is a lot of information and a lot of connection between the toxins we carry within our system and Alzheimer's. And that would be a lot of, let's say you had some history of dealing with pesticides or herbicides, things like Roundup. If you live in a house that has mold. So they may look at those kinds of things. They may also look at if you've had Lyme's in the past. And so they may look at these things to see what they could potentially do for some sort of solution as well. You may be asked if you want to have genetic testing. It depends on who you are, how old you are, and if you have a desire to do that. Thyroid testing, looking at B12. B vitamins are very important for cognitive function, so they're going to look at the B vitamins for sure. If you have been involved with potentially AIDS, you may be asked to take an HIV test. And then we talked about brain scans a little bit earlier, CT scans, MRIs. And it is really important, I will say, that if you're not asked to have a baseline MRI, it's important that you ask. And the reason being, what they're finding is that baseline MRI, and most physicians do this now because this is not terribly new anymore, but to have that baseline shows incrementally volume losses or changes going on in the brain as well, and the areas in which it's in. In some cases, people will have a PET scan. Those are not quite as highly utilized at this point, but at the same time, still very functional. And then spinal taps, just to see what your cerebral spinal fluid has in it. Those I don't believe are used a whole lot anymore as well. They try not to because it's not comfortable and it's an invasive procedure. So what we are looking at though, and I do want to say, is that the diagnosis of Alzheimer's is not just one thing. It's plaques and tangles, but yes, it's what's building up in your brain, but it's because of a variety of different cofactors within your lifestyle and within your system. You get all the testing done, and the phone call comes, or the video conference, or you go back to the doctor and the news comes and the words are spoken and you have Alzheimer's, or your loved one has Alzheimer's. Oh my goodness. Regardless of the fact that you were planning for it or believed it to be true, it's never quite the same until someone says it out loud. And I remember this for my mother-in-law. It was, regardless of the fact that we all knew, she knew, when the words were spoken by someone else, it was as though the lights went out. It was very difficult. Everybody felt their thing. And so we're going to talk about the feelings and all of that here in the next section. But the one thing to remember, you are not alone in this. You have support groups, you have a network of support people, and the person with Alzheimer's, even though they're going to progress right now, getting that diagnosis, your life is not over. The one thing that's really hard for a lot of people, and this is for any diagnosis, is that we start to live the diagnosis. So you're diabetic. I'm diabetic. Now I'm diabetic. I have Alzheimer's. I have cancer. I have whatever it is. I'm infertile. I have pancreatic disease. It becomes who they are. And what I want you to take, if you take nothing else from today, is to remember that the person diagnosed, whether that's you or a loved one, that diagnosis is a word. It does not take up the person. The person's still living. Person still has the ability to love, to feel, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But so what do you do first? You get it. You get this information, and it's pounded on you. All of a sudden, what you knew was true is now real. You need to let that information settle. You need to swallow it. You need to feel it. You need to just let it do what it needs to do in your own system, or for both of you. Whether you're a child of a person with Alzheimer's diagnosis, you're a spouse, you're a partner, you're a friend, you're whomever, everybody is going to feel something. So just feel it. Be angry. So you need to let those feelings just drop on you and just let them ooze in. And understand that you're not alone. And then think about when some of the emotion has dissipated, think about action. What are those next steps? And just remember that you're still you, and your spouse is still your spouse, or your mother, or your aunt, or your cousin, or your sister. But feel the feelings. Do it. It's a whirlwind. Anger, shock, hate, hopelessness, guilt. What did I do? Why? It's a grieving process. You're grieving. Some people will grieve the loss of themselves, but it's not time yet. Don't grieve the loss of yourself. Reaffirm who you are. Reaffirm what you still can do, and do it. Don't wait. We all wait. Oh, I'll do it later. Oh, all this. Oh, all that. Do it now. But also feel the feelings and feel a relief. If it's something that you knew and just needed an answer for, feel it. If you're okay with it, that's okay too. Just let it be. Be and feel what you need to feel, and let other people do the same. But when those feelings have kind of settled in, and when you're thinking more logically and more rationally, and it's time to start talking about the decisions that have to be made. Who are you going to tell? When are you going to share it? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to say? How do you want to say it? And then what and how are you going to plan for things moving forward as there's progression going on? So let's first talk about, who do you tell? And that's all an intimate family decision. It's not even a family decision. Excuse me. It's the person and that closest person's decision. It could be a spouse, a person-spouse combination. It could be the person and a daughter, whoever it is. Or if you're alone, it's you. And if that's how you decide to do it, that's perfectly fine. But keep in mind that you do want to tell people. People are going to have to know, because there's going to be some changes that are going to happen over time. And you want to be sure that those people who you love and who are going to support you are in the know. And it's okay to tell them. So you may wait to tell your grandchildren until you're physically there. You may want to tell them. So you decide, you and that special person or a couple special people will decide on who tells who, and then we'll talk about when. Additionally, if you're an early onset person, someone who is still working, it's important to figure out and discuss with your significant other or whomever that when it's going to feel appropriate to tell your employer. If you're already having a lot of changes, you may need to tell your employer right away. You may not need to tell your employer right away. You have to feel out where that time frame is, because telling your employer is a little bit different too, because you have to be careful sometimes, depending on where you work, on what will your job allow for you to do. And sometimes there's some legalities that go along with that. So who do you tell? So when you're thinking about who to tell, just consider these few things. Who are you the most comfortable telling? Who would you just be able to sit down and go, oh my gosh, you know what? Here's what we found out today. And you'd be perfectly comfortable saying it just like that, or how in your own voice. I got to tell you something. It's hard for me to say this, but I need to tell you I've got Alzheimer's. Tell those people first. Tell the people who you are comfortable with. Who you believe is going to take the information well. And if you're in a place of high emotion, it's not a great time to tell the other people who are going to have high emotion that you have Alzheimer's. Now, that may be somebody in your family. And again, some decisions are going to be, you're going to have to, play around with some of this stuff. But people who are going to take the information well are also people who are going to be like, okay, I'm terribly sorry you have this, but what can I do to help you? What can we do? What can so-and-so and I do to help you move through this? And they're going to be willing and supportive right away. You're going to know those people, and you feel that already, who it is that's going to be the most supportive and the most easy to tell. Not only for you to tell, but are also going to be accepting of information and say, okay, let's go. What are we going to do? How are we going to help you? And these people are also going to be people, because you're going to need this. You and your spouse, loved one, who your care partner is going to need these people along the way as things change. And then the other thing to consider is what I talked about just briefly, is just realize that just like you and your spouse had maybe very different emotions or reactions to the information, the people around you are also going to react. They're also going to have to go, whoa, I never knew. I had no idea. Or, oh my gosh. Or they're going to, like I said, or they're going to be the person of, wow, but you know what? I love you. It doesn't matter. And so some people just can take it. And some people are very reactive to things. Everybody has to manage it in their own way. So consider those things as you decide who you're going to tell. Additionally, when will you tell them? That's a big deal as well, because for some people, for my mother-in-law, it was, everybody pretty much knew, because she had erratic behaviors. And so when the word got out that she had Alzheimer's, it was like, yeah, we kind of thought so. Or that she had dementia of some kind. But for people who are early, who may not have a lot of clinical symptoms, who are just moving around in life as usual, some people are going to be shocked. But what you want to do is you want to be ready. When you tell those people, when you decide who you're going to tell and what you're going to tell, you want to make sure that that you're ready to tell them as well. Again, you've not accepted, but you've got the emotions under control. And if the individual who is diagnosed is actually still capable of sharing the information, you want to do that early enough so that that person can help share the information. Or if the individual doesn't want to share it and leaves that to a spouse or a significant other of some kind or a child, that's perfectly fine too. But everybody has to be pretty much ready to share the information. So don't go out and talk about it if you're not ready to talk about it. Accept, and again, I shouldn't use accept. Take those emotions in, use them, get them out of your system, move them through. And it's okay if you're going to cry or you'll be emotional, but at the same time, you're also ready to share the information. And for people, a lot of people have kids who live far away or have grandchildren who are very close to them, who live in a different state or something like that. Those kind of conversations are a little bit different, and we'll talk about them in a few minutes in a little more detail, because you also don't want to do piecemeal things, especially if you have a large family. Dependent on the dynamics of the family. Those always play into everything. So what do you say? You just blurt it out? Do you have this litany of things of this is what I've been going through? Do you need to share an encyclopedia of information so the people that are listening know and understand what you're going through? Again, that's going to be up to who you're telling. But the interesting thing, and one thing that puts a lot of people at ease, especially if family members, or if you're in the early stages, it's understanding what it is that you're going through. What is it that people need to know about the disease? They obviously know there's going to be some forgetfulness, but what kinds of things do you want to share maybe about your own journey right now? The things that you've been noticing. And so the level of progression of the individual having that diagnosis is also going to determine if the individual shares information. If that person's too emotional, can't do it, then somebody else will be responsible for it. But if there's a way that both or the person can share the information about themselves, it gives them strength and power and empowerment to say, I have this is what I know about it, and here's what I'm going to share with you about what I've gone through thus far. People may not understand dementia, so you may want to have some answers ready to questions that they may ask. So kind of anticipate what it is they may ask. Well, what does that mean? How long what? How long? What's going to happen to you? And so have some ideas ready about what you're going to say, or sit down with your loved one or your spouse or whomever and kind of jot down some things that you know about the disease. You can read up on it a little bit more, and share that information with the people that you are talking to. Children alike. Not everybody's in the healthcare space and doesn't understand it. They don't understand what it looks like. They don't understand what it will look like. They don't understand what you're feeling. They just don't. They don't understand some of the subtle changes that may happen or have happened. And then ways to explain it, a medical condition. One of the things that the Alzheimer's Association talks about is that it's a medical condition, but there's no medication for it. So sometimes people have a hard time with that. It's like, yeah, I've got this, but there's nothing I can take. It's not like I've got it's not like I've got bronchitis and I can take something for it. There's no pill to take to reverse it. There's a lot of things out there that try and slow it, but there's nothing that takes it away. So other things that you can do is share resources. If you just don't have the wherewithal to sit down and do a lot of education on your own, you have a ton of things going through your head. You're thinking about all the things forward that have to be changed or considered. You feel all muddled. That's okay. You don't have to share lots of information. Some people want to. share resources, share the Alzheimer's Association, share the Alzheimer's Federation, share Mayo Clinic. There's a bunch of things, any kind of support groups. And people may decide that they want to be in a support group, even if they're your friends. Support groups aren't necessarily made for just the person and the loved one or whatnot who has Alzheimer's or dementia. Other people need them as well because they love you, they care about you, and they want to know more and they want to understand how better to support you. So support groups are great for everybody. And just keeping that in mind and telling them, hey, you know what? Kendal has this great support group. I really think you guys should go. You're going to learn a lot, and you're going to get some different perspectives. It's going to be great. So go to that. I just can't talk to you about it. It's just too much for me right now. So, and then finding out too, in the early phases of the diagnosis, who you can count on to be the essential people in your life is going to be really helpful for the caregiver, because that caregiver can't go through, it's like raising a child. You can't raise a child alone. It takes a village. It takes a village to support in this case as well. And then what do you do with the grandchildren? Oh, goodness sakes, they're a whole animal in and of themselves. But kids can be really adaptable, and they can really take information and they spin it in a whole different way than adults. And for young children, you want to use age-appropriate examples. There might be a book or there might be something available that you can look at, or you can just talk to when you're out playing or something and you're sitting in the garden or you're talking together or whatever you may be doing with your young grandchildren. And it might be grandma, if grandma has Alzheimer's and just got diagnosed, or it might be grandma and grandpa sitting together, as long as it's not provided to them in a scary situation, in a scary way, and it's confrontational. Kids are very interesting when they're told. My niece was, and everybody is different, of course, too, but my niece was like, oh, okay. And she was like 6. And she just went with it. And she started playing with grandma in a different way and meeting her needs in a different way. And it just sort of happened. Other children are going to be very inquisitive. They're going to want to understand, well, what is it? What's going on? Some kids don't. Some kids like the science of it. And so you have to share the information in a way that is appropriate and not frightening for your grandchildren. Or for young children, whoever they may be. And depending on the age will depend on how technical you get with it. And then understanding some kids when they hear, because a lot of people will say, well, grandma's sick. Well, then they're worried that they might get it. So utilizing, different types of words can be very helpful, and letting them know that it's not something they can get. And then as well, if you see signs of worry or concern on your grandchildren's face or young children, talk with them about what they might be afraid of. And you can share that sometimes you're afraid too. It's okay to be honest with kids. And then encourage communication. It's the same as with adults. You want them to share their feelings, because more than likely, if they're close to grandma or grandpa or aunt or uncle or whomever this person is, or their mom or their dad, they're going to have feelings about it. They're going to be a little bit nervous. And it's no different with adult children too, but we're just speaking to young children here. And then if moods change or behaviors change in the individual who has dementia as it moves down the road and the progression starts, letting the kids know that that's not grandma's fault. And I'm using grandma here just for simplicity's sake. And then helping children understand that if grandma does something that's unusual or kind of out of the norm of what would be acceptable, that's because of what's going on with her, and it's not something that's, the way to act. For teenagers and for other children, adult children, it's going to be very similar to how you're going to talk to your supportive friends. Again, the feelings you're going to have to consider and how you're going to get them together. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But how do you deliver the information then? If conversations are always best done in person, it makes no difference what's going on. If you're having a conversation at your employer, and it's always best to talk to your boss in person, not on the phone, not through an email. And so some of those things are just easy ways to get the information out, but telling them in person makes a world of difference. And it also shows that you care enough to spend the time with them to tell them, and they're going to want to be with you. They're not going to want to be over the phone. They're going to want to reach out and touch you. Many families are not in close proximity, so have complex dynamics. So then what do? We'll talk about family meetings in a minute. Plan a family gathering, or sometimes, now we've got all this video technology. So if you want to get all your children together or a larger group of people together at one time, scheduling a video is actually not a bad thing either. You can do a lot of, you can see a lot of emotion. You just can't reach out, touch somebody. So having a family meeting. Families are very interesting. Every family has got its own set of dynamics. Some are very smooth, some aren't. And some people are ready to go, and some are like, that really spooks me. I'm really nervous about that. But having the family together, depending on your family situation, is a great time to share the diagnosis. You're not going to do it at a holiday or anything like that, but you want to get everybody together and sit down and have a talk. It's an open time for communication and for you to educate, and other family members may say, yeah, I really thought something was going on. And in many cases, the kids may already know. Like for my mother-in-law, the whole family knew, and we were already dealing with pieces of it in different ways. But when the diagnosis came, we got together and we sat and talked about it. My father-in-law was a little bit nervous about allowing anybody to do anything. And that's where many people go with this. They want to take care of everything, but just know that at some point support is going to be needed. So what you can do during family meetings is, dedicate some time to talking about how you feel about it, being open about it, starting to problem solve a little bit, brainstorming what kind of needs might be up and coming in the near future and as you move down the path, and then discuss what decisions have to be made. And I'm going to bring that up in a little bit more detail in a minute. So when you have a family meeting, there are family meetings where everything goes smoothly. Everybody is harmonious. Everybody works well and the dynamics are great. There are other families who have people who are leaders. They want to take charge. And again, other people who are like, I don't want to do it. There are people who deny it. No, mom doesn't have that. I just think it's something else. She's got some problems with her kidneys and it's affecting her brain. It's not dementia, it's not Alzheimer's. And you have to deal with what your family gives you. But having a family meeting can help organize this. And what you may consider is that the reason that you have a meeting is to plan and process. So you may want to set just a couple goals. And family meetings don't have to happen just one time. Families can meet periodically. Families can only meet once. And dad says, if mom who has Alzheimer's and dad says, nope, I'm taking care of it, and there's one lead person in the family who kind of is that go-to, great. But then make sure that the rest of the family understands that that charge person is really going to need some help along the way, whether it's financial, whether it's just support and perspective, whether it's transportation, whether it's just a little bit of respite. Those kinds of things all need to be discussed. And these family meetings are a great time to do that. And remember that the meeting is for the betterment of the person who's going through it and the main caregiver as well, because the less stress, the better. Keep the stress low. And then when you do these meetings, have some follow-up and some plans. So you can follow up on some different things. So how to have a productive meeting? Set a date and a time and expect that everybody will be there. And the necessity of the meeting is important. Plan what you're going to discuss and only have just a couple of things. If you're a family who can take on a lot, go for it. If your family is rather discombobulated and you've got people running all over the place, or people who are really nervous about it and really in charge, just set a limited number of things to talk about at one time so that people don't get overwhelmed. And then create an atmosphere that's comfortable and open, respectful. It has an atmosphere of being able to talk to one another. Schedule breaks if the individual who has Alzheimer's loses concentration, gets caught up in the moment, is just not able to, stay on top of what's going on. Take some breaks, walk away, come back. Remember, this is for the person who has Alzheimer's, the caregivers, and that support network of family that's going to be involved. Excuse me. And in many cases, there is no right answer. Every family is different. So what worked for my husband and our family may not work for yours. But talking about it together, excuse me, is how you come up with the right choices for your family. The big thing too, thank everybody at the end of the meeting. Everybody's nervous. Everybody's scared. Everybody's kind of freaked out about the fact that mom is going to, she's going to progress along this path. And nobody wants to see it. And mom certainly doesn't want to go down there. But we all have to do it together. So let's unify and do it together. And thank everybody for being there, and make sure that they appreciate that you let them know you're appreciative of their time for spending as well. Especially if you invite family or other support people. It doesn't have to be just friends or family. It can be friends if that's what you have instead of family. So what do you need to plan now? So you've gone through the testing, you got the diagnosis, you've started discussions with the family, and you've kind of started to absorb all those feelings, and you're moving through grief, or you're starting to accept, or whatever it is, but you're still living. You need to talk about what kind of household responsibilities the other person is going to have to be responsible for. When my mother-in-law and father-in-law figured all this out, my mother-in-law was the one who took care of the finances. She cooked. My father-in-law did none of them. And he was just a typical man from back in that generation. He didn't take care of the household stuff. He didn't even schedule his own hair appointments to go get a haircut. And so you have to divvy up what those responsibilities are going to be, or who's going to get them, how it's going to work. Do you need to have someone come in? Maybe not, maybe to do certain things. If it's mom and dad has Alzheimer's, might need somebody to do the lawn care, paint the house, those kinds of things. So what kind of responsibilities do you need to consider handing off, or who's going to get what? Managing the finances is a big one. You need to surely make sure it's somebody who you trust. Have a discussion about driving. Driving is a big one because it takes away independence, and nobody wants to give up their keys. So the sooner that you start having conversations about it and how to manage it when the time comes and the argument comes and the resistance of handing over the keys, what are some imaginative plans that you are going to set up? Placing special items, those special items, documents, different things like that, find out where they are. If one person has them all in a certain space, know where they are. Investments, trusts, wills, whatever. You want to start some estate planning, funeral planning, though that no one ever wants to talk about funeral planning, correct? But it's a needed thing. And my dad passed away unexpectedly, and thank God he and I had sat down and had some conversations about what he wanted, because my mother was in no place to take care of that, no place to do any decision making, and that was left to me. I'm a singleton. So knowing what the funeral plans and the wishes are is really important too, even if they're written down. As a child, I didn't know where they were. And so I was glad my dad had that conversation with me. And then bringing in help. Nobody wants to ask for help. But again, give yourself permission as the caregiver, as that care partner, as that spouse, you need rest too. You need mental health. You need safety for yourself, mental health safety. And that, unfortunately, is what my father-in-law didn't allow. And so he went down a different rabbit hole and ended up dying early. My mother-in-law is still alive, excuse me, loving where she's at in her, seriously. And I know that sounds really strange, but she is in a place right now where she is very comfortable with Alzheimer's. And, but my father-in-law had too much stress and was unable to manage it, and it took his life. So making sure that you bring in help and that you accept support from other people, give yourself permission. So it's really important. And then what to do in the meantime, because this doesn't happen just like this. You've got some time to remain alive. The person with the diagnosis has to remain alive. The loved ones are going to remain alive. So do something exciting with the time. And we want some brain health, physical health. Make sure that you do things that are going to take care of you. So for the person who has the diagnosis, the disease is a disease. It is a word. It is not you living in this very moment. If you're sitting there and thinking and you're worrying and you're doing other things, try. I know that it's not easy. I'm not saying that, but do something. Live your life. My mother-in-law and father-in-law were like, yep, we'll take these trips. We'll do this. We'll do that. My mother-in-law was in the earlier stages for a long time, and they never did anything. So don't wait. One of the things that's really powerful, both for the caregiver, for the kids, for anybody, be mindful. Be right here. Be right now. Think about what you can do. Look around, hear the birds, smell the rainy air, feel the grass under your feet. Be mindful. Keep your mind active. If you have the ability to still do some Sudoku or luminosity, or you're doing something on the computer, do that. Brain work is important. Join a support group. You have one right here. You're part of one. Eat healthy. And when I talk about that, I don't mean this, and again, this is for everyone. Do this for yourself, but bring your spouse or your support group, your support network into this too. Eating healthy fruits, vegetables, healthy meat, fish, decrease your starches, increase your good fats. All of those things make a difference in your brain chemistry, even if you're in the early set of Alzheimer's. Okay, if you're just finding out, you can still do things to help slow it. Get out and exercise. Take a short walk. Walking to the refrigerator isn't going to do it, but they do show that there is improvements in housework. So get your vacuuming done. Those kinds of things, but get out and enjoy, move around, optimize your vitamins and your minerals. And if you're a female and a male, but more so for females, if there's time, optimize your hormones, talk to your physician, set up routines for sleep. Sleep is absolutely necessary, and it cleans during your sleep at night. You have a time when your brain cleans out all the debris it needs to in order to be more active and function better. And everybody can do this. And then ask for help. Don't be too proud. For the care partners, again, for your reminder, nobody does this alone. Be kind to yourself. Remember, give yourself permission to take some time to be alone, to work through this yourself, to feel the feelings, and also to maintain your health. And again, I can only speak from the experience of my father-in-law and watching how horrible it was to see somebody who was so vibrant. Give yourself permission, take care of your physical and mental health. And I just talked about that a little bit ago. Feel what you feel and communicate. Keep talking to people, and try not to self-isolate. It's very easy to do. And a lot of people do it, but do your best to keep things open and express needs to other people. and then create routines that work for you and your spouse, for you and your that other person, the person with the diagnosis. And for your adult children and grandchildren, again, there is a piece of Alzheimer's that is the genetic component, and it's called the ApoE4 gene. And some children want to have the genome looked for, so they get genetic testing, but others don't. But what they're finding is even people who have the gene and a double copy of that gene can still keep their reduction lower of getting the disease by diet, exercise, stress, sleep, and reducing their toxic burden. So think about what you're doing in your life. If you're sitting in the audience and you're an adult child, or you have children and mom or dad or aunt or uncle or whomever has Alzheimer's, consider yourself lucky to know that right now there's so much positive research that all of these things on that list make a huge difference for you maybe not ever getting it. So keep those things in mind. So in conclusion for today, we went over just an overview of Alzheimer's and some of the facts. We reviewed diagnostics and the practitioners that you'll meet. We discussed sharing the diagnosis, family meetings, and then having a health and mental health mindset, keeping yourself going. So, but lastly, just keep the communication lines open. This is a time to maybe re-embrace some feelings with family or friends that you haven't had for a while. Time to problem solve, time to talk about things openly. And give yourself, if you're a caregiver, and if you have Alzheimer's yourself, give yourself permission to accept some help and take support. Because when people offer you help or offer you support or advice or just a hug, they care. So I hope that helps everyone, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Julia. Such an abundance of wonderful information. I really appreciate everything you shared. I do just have one quick question. I think it's worth asking. You mentioned when you are starting to see some of those early onset symptoms that it's important to speak to your PCP. And I can speak to the fact that sometimes we see with members when we're making that recommendation and they're presenting those concerns to their physician, the doctors are not always receptive. And how does someone advocate beyond that when a doctor kind of asks the questions and says, oh, you're doing fine, there's really nothing to worry about, but we're telling everyone to be proactive, and it's so important to have testing and things done at the early outset. Any suggestions for how they might broach that topic further with a physician?
I think that from our perspective as healthcare providers or in that health space, I think that if we can help these people as well, kind of create one of the things that doctors don't always know, especially Western medicine docs, which is typically who we see, right? Those new physicians sometimes have more of that interest in the novel things. Okay, so if there are people who are coming and starting to go to physicians and things like that, having like not abundance, but just having a little bit of a library of some of the factual pieces to share with the doctor is really important. So if there's a way that even Kendal at home could help create a little library for their members of some of the articles, the scientific journal articles that say, hey, look at this. This is what I'm seeing, and this is what I'm feeling. And I'll say even right now, for myself, let me talk about that. I have brain fog, I have all these other things because I'm menopausal. But I have also, my physician won't prescribe me something that I know that I need from a hormone balancing perspective. So I decided to move to functional medicine where they look at things a little bit differently. So that's an option as well. I did share some information with my physician, and I haven't heard back from her yet on that. But the more knowledge, the more science that Western medicine docs actually will take and review, I think they're in a mindset, and that's right. The way it is. I think that if we come across with some literature that can help share with the docs. If there's then a desire, let's say the patient is just like, I'm just not getting my questions answered. I think even family members can say, Mom, Dad, I really think you should try and see someone else. Try
Right.
this. And because functional medicine physicians look at things a little bit differently. They don't look at the ranges, they look at what's optimized for each individual.
Mhm.
And so those things can make a big difference. You're just getting a different perspective on medicine. Does that help a little bit?
No, I appreciate that for sure. I think that's important information to share because often individuals will say, well, my primary doctor is not concerned, so there's not an issue. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's not an issue that needs further discovery. So no, I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Can I just add to that one thing, Marla, is that sometimes too, at least I'll say this for my own mother, who's going through a weird set of health issues right now. I think when she hears from her doctor that there's nothing going on, that she's like,
Right.
but at the same time, I always kind of poke her and say, hey, Mom, you haven't found the root of your problem yet.
Mhm.
So I think that kids or other supportive family or friends can also be that little, excuse me, to help.
Absolutely.
And if they can go along to the visit and make a little noise, that makes a big difference too.
Absolutely. Nope.
So,
Couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Yep.
We appreciate it. Well, thanks again for being here today. We look forward to further presentations and have a great weekend, everybody.
great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.